Let me ask you a question, and don't answer it out loud, answer it honestly. If your life stayed exactly the same for the next 12 months, how would that feel? Because here's the truth most people don't want to face. It's not time that traps you, it's patterns. Right now, there are forces working beneath the surface, silent, invisible, that are shaping your decisions and stealing your momentum. They don't look like problems, they feel like comfort. And if you don't break them now, 2026 will look just like every year before it. Tonight, that changes. Most people believe they're stuck because they don't have enough time, money, support, or opportunities. But if we're being honest, really honest, that's not what's holding them back. The real reason lives much deeper, and it's quieter than most people expect. It's fear. Not the loud, dramatic fear that screams at you, but the subtle, everyday fear that whispers just enough to keep you exactly where you are. Fear of failure doesn't show up holding a sign that says, don't try. It disguises itself as logic. It sounds reasonable. It tells you, wait until you're more prepared. This isn't the right time. What if it doesn't work? And before you know it, days turn into months, months turn into years, and your life starts looking exactly the same while the calendar keeps changing. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Fear isn't stopping you because it's powerful. It's stopping you because it's familiar. Your brain is wired to protect you, not to make you fulfilled. So every time you think about stepping forward, stretching yourself, or doing something that matters, your nervous system kicks in and says, danger. But the danger it's reacting to isn't real. It's emotional risk. It's the possibility of embarrassment, rejection, or disappointment. And fear of failure is sneaky. It doesn't just stop you from starting. Sometimes it shows up after you've already begun. You take one step forward, things get uncomfortable, and suddenly you slow down. You hesitate. You start questioning yourself. You lower your standards, not because you can't do more, but because doing more would mean risking failure again. What most people call procrastination is actually fear in disguise. You're not lazy. You're protecting yourself. Overthinking? That's fear trying to stay in control, waiting for motivation. That's fear saying don't move until it feels safe. But growth has never felt safe. Progress has never been comfortable. Every breakthrough in your life happened when you step forward without certainty. Think about it. If fear disappeared tomorrow, how different would your decisions be? What conversation would you finally have? What opportunity would you take? What version of yourself would you stop postponing? Fear keeps you stuck, not because you can't handle failure, but because you've been taught to see failure as something to avoid instead of something to use. Here's a shift that changes everything. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's the path to it. Every successful person you admire has failed more times than most people have even tried. The difference is they didn't let failure define them. They used it as feedback. They learned, they adjusted, they moved again. Fear loses its grip the moment you stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what will? Cost me if I don't try. Because the real failure isn't falling short, it's living beneath your potential. It's knowing deep down that you played small when you were capable of more. And here's the most powerful truth. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. Courage means you move while fear is still there. You don't wait for confidence. You build confidence through action. Confidence is a byproduct, not a prerequisite. When you shift your focus from outcome to action, fear weakens. When you stop trying to be perfect and commit to progress, fear loses its power. The moment you decide, I'm willing to look foolish, I'm willing to fail forward, I'm willing to grow, something inside you changes. Your energy shifts, your posture changes, your decisions become stronger. Fear can only control you when you obey it. The second you take action in spite of it, you reclaim your power. And once you do that once, you realize something incredible. You were never stuck. You were just listening to the wrong voice. So here's the truth you need to lock in right now. Fear doesn't mean stop. Fear means you're standing at the edge of growth. And if you're willing to step forward anyway, everything begins to change. After fear loosens its grip, there's another force quietly shaping your life, one that's even harder to spot because it feels like truth. These are the beliefs you've been carrying for years, maybe decades, and most of them were never chosen consciously. They were handed to you through experiences, repetition, and moments of emotional intensity. And once they take root, they begin to run your life on autopilot. A belief is nothing more than a thought you've repeated so many times that your brain accepted it as reality. And the most dangerous beliefs aren't the ones that sound negative on the surface. They're the ones that sound reasonable. I'm just not that kind of person. People like me don't get those opportunities. I tried before and it didn't work, so that's just how it is. These thoughts feel factual, but they're not facts. They're interpretations, and interpretations can be changed. Here's what most people don't realize. Your Beliefs shape what you notice, what you avoid, and what you believe is possible. They filter reality. Two people can live in the same world, face the same circumstances, and experience completely different lives, not because of luck, but because of what they believe about themselves and the world. Limiting beliefs don't always scream you can't. Sometimes they whisper, be realistic. They tell you to lower your expectations to avoid disappointment. They convince you that playing small is maturity. And over time, those beliefs quietly shrink your identity. You stop chasing what excites you. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop believing you're capable of more. And here's the most important part. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your beliefs. You can set the biggest goals in the world, but if deep down you don't believe you are worthy, capable, or enough, your actions will always sabotage the outcome, not because you're broken, but because your nervous system is trying to stay aligned with what it believes is true. Beliefs are formed in moments of emotional intensity. A rejection, a failure, a comment from someone you respected. In that moment, your brain looked for meaning and it came up with a rule. Don't try again. I'm not good at this. This is dangerous. And once that rule is written, your brain works overtime to prove it right. That's why people often say, I don't know why this keeps happening to me. It keeps happening because your beliefs are guiding your decisions without your permission. They influence who you talk to, what risks you take, and how you respond when things get hard. But here's the shift that changes everything. Beliefs are not permanent. They're learned, and anything learned can be unlearned. The moment you challenge a belief, it begins to lose its power. The moment you question it, instead of obeying it, you create space for a new identity. Instead of asking, is this true? Ask, is this belief serving me? Because a belief doesn't need to be false to be limiting. It just needs to hold you back. And the most empowering beliefs are the ones that create energy, possibility, and movement. When you replace I can't with I'm learning, your brain opens up. When you replace this is who I am with this is who I've been, you give yourself permission to evolve. Growth begins the moment you stop defending your limitations and start building a new story. Your past does not define your potential. Your past only provides data, and data is meant to be used, not worshiped. You are not your mistakes. You are not your failures. You are the person who survived them, and that alone proves you're stronger than you think. The moment you decide to upgrade your beliefs, your behavior follows, your standards rise, your actions change, your results begin to shift, not overnight, but inevitably, because when belief changes, identity changes, and when identity changes, life follows. So if you want 2026 to be different, don't just set new goals, install new beliefs. Decide right now that the story you've been telling yourself is up for revision. Because the moment you believe more is possible for you, you start becoming the person who proves it. Change the belief, and the future changes with it. Once fear is faced and beliefs are upgraded, there's one final place where most people still get trapped. And this one is brutal because it looks like progress. It feels like effort. It sounds intelligent, but it keeps people stuck year after year. It's inconsistent action. Most people don't have a lack of knowledge. They know what to do. They've read the books, watched the videos, listened to the podcasts, taken the notes. They understand mindset. They understand habits. They understand discipline. And yet their life doesn't change, not because they don't care, but because they act in bursts instead of standards. They get inspired, take action for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then life happens. Energy drops, motivation fades, doubt creeps back in, and instead of continuing, they pause, they wait. They tell themselves they'll restart when things feel clearer, easier, or more aligned. But clarity doesn't come before action. Clarity comes from action. Here's the truth. Intensity feels good, but consistency changes lives. Anyone can go all in when emotions are high. Anyone can make promises when inspiration is strong, but the real transformation happens in the queue. You hit moments when no one is watching, when you don't feel like it, when the results aren't showing yet, and you show up anyway. Inconsistent action trains your brain to break trust with yourself. Every time you say you're going to do something and don't follow through, your self-belief weakens. Over time, you stop taking your own commitments seriously, not consciously, but neurologically. And when that happens, confidence erodes from the inside out. That's why so many people feel frustrated and exhausted without knowing why. They're not tired from doing too much. They're tired from starting and stopping, from building momentum and then killing it, from giving themselves hope and then pulling it away. Momentum is fragile at first. It needs protection. It grows through repetition, not perfection. But most people sabotage momentum because they expect immediate results. They take action and then watch the clock. They look for proof too soon. And when they don't see progress fast enough, they assume it's not working. But success doesn't move in a straight line, it compounds. Small actions done consistently create massive shifts over time, but only if you stay in the game long enough for the compounding to kick in. Waiting to feel motivated is a trap. Motivation is a visitor. It comes and goes. Standards are permanent. When you raise your standards, you don't negotiate with your emotions. You don't ask, do I feel like it? You decide, this is who I am now. An identity-driven inaction is unstoppable. The most powerful shift you can make is this. Stop focusing on how big the action is and start focusing on how often you show up. Small actions, done daily, rewire your identity. They tell your brain, I'm the kind of person who follows through. And once that identity is installed, consistency becomes natural. You don't need more time. You don't need more information. You don't need perfect conditions. You need a non-negotiable commitment to move forward, even when it's uncomfortable, boring, or inconvenient. The people who win are not the most talented. They're not the most confident. They're the most consistent. They do the boring things better than everyone else. They show up when excitement fades. They keep going when results lag behind effort. And here's what changes everything. Once you stop stopping, life starts responding. Opportunities appear. Confidence grows. Energy increases. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Consistency turns fear into fuel. It turns belief into evidence. It turns effort into identity. And identity is what shapes your future. So if you want to break free in 2026, stop waiting for the perfect moment. Decide that showing up is who you are now. Because the moment you commit to consistent action, you stop being stuck and start becoming unstoppable. Before anything truly changes in your life, something far more important has to happen first. You have to see what's actually been running it, not what you tell people. Not what you explain away. What's really been shaping your decisions when no one else is watching, because you cannot change what you are not aware of. And most people live their entire lives reacting instead of consciously choosing. Awareness is the moment the lights come on. It's the difference between living on autopilot and stepping into the driver's seat. Most people think they're making decisions, but they're actually following patterns. Emotional patterns, mental habits, reactions built years ago. They wake up, respond to the same triggers, repeat the same behaviors, and then wonder why the results never change. Here's the hard truth. Your life is the result of your patterns, not your intentions. Good intentions don't create transformation. Awareness does, because awareness gives you choice, and choice is power. Think about how many times you've said, that's just how I am, or that's just how things go for me. That sentence alone reveals unconscious living. It sounds harmless, but it's a declaration that you're no longer questioning the pattern. And the moment you stop questioning, the pattern owns you. Most people don't fail because they lack strength or intelligence. They fail because they never stop long enough to observe themselves. They're so busy reacting that they never notice the emotional triggers pulling the strings. A comment sets them off, a setback shuts them down, a delay convinces them to quit, and they call it personality when it's Ely programming. Awareness begins when you interrupt the pattern, when you notice the feeling before the reaction, when you catch the thought before it becomes a belief, when you pause long enough to ask what's really happening here. That pause is everything. In that space, you reclaim control. The moment you become aware of your fear, it loses some of its power. The moment you see a limiting belief, it stops being truth and becomes a story. The moment you recognize inconsistency, you realize it's a choice, not a flaw. Awareness doesn't judge, it reveals. And here's what most people don't realize. Awareness is not passive. It's an active practice. It's deciding to observe your thoughts instead of being consumed by them. It's noticing your emotional state before it dictates your behavior. It's catching yourself in old habits and choosing differently, even when it feels uncomfortable. Most breakthroughs don't come from learning something new. They come from seeing something old clearly for the first time. The patterns you've been living in didn't appear overnight. They were built through repetition. And the only way to break repetition is to bring it into conscious awareness. Once you see the pattern, you can change the response. Once you change the response, the outcome changes. And once outcomes change, your identity begins to shift. But it all starts with seeing. Awareness also brings responsibility, and that's why many people avoid it. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You can't blame circumstances the same way. You can't pretend you didn't know. Awareness hands you the keys and says, now it's on you. And that can feel heavy until you realize how empowering it is. When you become aware, you stop living in reaction and start living in intention. You stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start asking, what am I doing that's creating this? That question alone can change the trajectory of your life. Awareness turns chaos into clarity. It helps you understand why certain goals never stick, why certain relationships repeat the same dynamics, why certain challenges show up again and again. They're not punishments. They're patterns asking to be noticed. And once you notice them, you're free, not because everything instantly changes, but because now you have choice. And choice is the birthplace of transformation. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to see clearly one pattern, one reaction, one moment at a time. That's how real change begins, not with force, but with awareness. Because the moment you see the truth of what's been running your life, you stop being a passenger and you take the wheel. Once awareness kicks in, everything becomes clearer. But clarity alone doesn't move your life forward. What moves your life is the meaning you attach to what you see. This is where most people either unlock momentum or fall right back into old patterns. Because mindset isn't about being positive, it's about being powerful in how you interpret your experiences. Every situation in your life is neutral until you decide what it means. The event itself has no power. The meaning you assign to it does. Two people can face the same setback. One grows stronger, the other gives up. The difference isn't talent or luck, it's interpretation. Most people automatically focus on what's wrong. They scan for problems, dangers, and reasons to hesitate. And that focus trains the brain to expect struggle. What you focus on expands, what you consistently look for you find, and what you find becomes your reality. A powerful mindset doesn't deny reality, it directs attention, it asks better questions. Instead of why is this happening to me, it asks, what is this teaching me? Instead of what if I fail, it asks, how does this make me stronger? Those questions shift your emotional state, and your emotional state determines your actions. Your emotions are not random. They're signals driven by focus and meaning. Change your focus and your emotions change. Change your emotions and your behavior follows. This is how momentum is created, not by forcing action, but by shifting state. Most people wait for confidence before they act. But confidence is not something you find. It's something you generate. It comes from keeping promises to yourself. It comes from facing discomfort and realizing you survive. Every small win strengthens your identity. Every time you move forward despite fear, you teach your nervous system that growth is safe. Another critical shift is learning to see discomfort as a sign of expansion, not danger. Discomfort doesn't mean something is wrong. It means something is changing. Growth always feels unfamiliar before it feels empowering. If you interpret discomfort as failure, you'll retreat. If you interpret it as progress, you'll lean in. This is where most people quit, right before the breakthrough. Not because they can't do it, but because they misread the signal. They think struggle means stop when it actually means stay. A powerful mindset also understands progress over perfection. Perfection is paralysis. It convinces you that unless everything is right, nothing counts. Progress says move forward anyway, and progress builds momentum faster than perfection ever could. When you stop demanding flawless outcomes and start rewarding effort, your energy shifts. You show up more, you try more, you fail forward faster, and momentum begins to snowball. Gratitude plays a role here too, not as a cliche, but as a strategy. When you train your brain to notice what's working, you create emotional strength. Gratitude doesn't mean settling, it means stabilizing your state so you can move forward from a place of power, not desperation. And here's the real secret. Momentum isn't built in giant leaps. It's built through emotional mastery. When you can shift your state on command, when you can redirect focus, reframe meaning, and take action, even when you don't feel like it, you become unstoppable. Life will always present challenges. The difference is no longer whether problems show up, but how you respond when they do. With the right mindset, obstacles become fuel. Resistance becomes training. Pressure becomes preparation. This is how momentum compounds. One empowered decision leads to another. One strong response builds confidence for the next. Suddenly, what once felt impossible becomes normal. When you master your mindset, you don't wait for motivation, you create it. You don't avoid discomfort, you use it. And you don't hope for change, you become the force that creates it. Shift your focus, change your meaning, and momentum will follow. At some point, insight has to turn into commitment. Awareness without execution is just entertainment. Understanding without application changes nothing. This is the moment where everything you've recognized, reframed, and rebuilt must come together into a way of living. Not a burst of effort, but a standard. You refuse to negotiate. Most people think transformation happens when they feel ready, but readiness is a myth. The people who change their lives don't wait for certainty. They move with clarity of decision. They decide who they're going to be, and then they align their actions to that identity day after day. This is where an action blueprint matters, not as a rigid plan, but as a framework for momentum. You don't need a perfect roadmap. You need direction, commitment, and daily execution. Small steps taken consistently beat massive plans that never leave your head. Start by choosing what matters most. Not everything, what truly matters. When your focus is scattered, your energy is diluted. But when you decide these are my non-negotiables, your life organizes itself around that decision. Progress accelerates when priorities are clear. Next, break big goals into daily actions. The mind gets overwhelmed by the future, but it responds to what's immediate. Ask yourself, what's the smallest action I can take today that moves me forward? Then do it. No debate, no delay. Action builds confidence. Confidence builds identity. Identity builds results. And here's the key: schedule your growth. Don't leave it to chance. If it's not in your calendar, it's not real. Treat your personal standards with the same respect you give external obligations, because every time you honor your commitment to yourself, you strengthen self-trust. There will be days when you don't feel like showing up. Those days matter the most, because that's when identity is built. Anyone can act when emotions are high. The real power comes from consistency when emotions are low. Another part of this blueprint is review, not judgment. Review. At the end of each day or week, ask what worked, what didn't, what will I adjust? This keeps you in growth mode instead of guilt mode. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be adaptive. Progress requires flexibility, not rigidity. Life will challenge your plans. That's not failure. That's feedback. When something doesn't work, you don't quit. You adjust the strategy and move again. Momentum belongs to those who stay in motion. Also, raise your environment to support your standards. Your surroundings shape your behavior more than willpower ever will. Reduce friction for good habits. Increase friction for bad ones. Design your environment so success becomes the path of least resistance. And don't underestimate the power of one decision. One decision, followed by consistent action, can change the trajectory of your entire life. Most breakthroughs don't come from doing everything differently. They come from doing one thing differently long enough for it to compound. This is how you break free, not with hype, not with waiting, but with daily alignment between who you say you are and what you actually do. You don't need a new year to start, but this is your moment to commit. Decide now that you're done repeating old cycles. Decide that your standards are higher. Decide that showing up is who you are now. Because when clarity, belief, awareness, mindset, and consistent action come together, there is no force strong enough to keep you stuck. This is the year you move and you never look back.